today I'm gonna take you guys through my trophy room, talk you through some of the stories, and hopefully get you guys excited about the fall as well. We'll start with two of my mule deer bucks. This one right above me is actually the buck that really got me into deer hunting in general. I'd always grown up hunting, done a lot of mule deer hunting with my dad, never really killed a big buck. This was the first buck that I saw that was really big and got me really excited. I think it was 2018, and it was opening morning. The night before, we'd scouted out the spot and seen a ton of big deer in it. And so we hiked in super early and got to our spot 20-30 minutes before light. And I remember I was freezing, and as the sun came up, I was starting to warm up, and we looked around, and this buck and another giant buck were both sitting there at about 400 yards. At the time, we didn't really have advanced ballistics or any turrets on our scopes. So all we really knew was, hey, at 300 yards, hold this many inches high. So this buck came out at, I wanna say 375. Again, with no turrets, it was really an educated guess. We knew, hey, we had to hold, 12, 13 inches high. And I laid down, got on the gun, shot this buck, and we were so excited. We were hooping and hollering. We got over to the buck, and I remember that was the moment that I knew I was hooked on hunting. I'd always loved hunting, but holding an animal of that size really changed it all for me. It was an amazing hunt and something that I'll always remember. This next one right here, I actually killed the next year after. When we killed this deer, my dad had told me, you'll never kill another deer like that again. He scores right around that 180 mark. And I believed him. I didn't know if I would ever kill anything that big ever again. We'd hardly ever seen anything that big. And the next year, it was snowing, and there's a lot more deer movement and rut activity when that snow hits. That's what this buck was doing. We were up on a glassing knob, and we had seen this buck from the glassing knob about almost a mile away. And he's right at that about 30-inch mark wide. And I could just see him with my naked eye. I said, oh my gosh, that's a giant deer, we have to go. So we ran down, we drove all the way over there down the road. Me and my dad's buddy Jake, we both hopped out, we both had tags. And I was gonna let him shoot first, but I said, okay, I'm gonna back you up if you miss. And he had this really cheap rangefinder. It was pretty funny because he ranged it and he's like, all right, it's 300 yards. I'm like, okay, we didn't even second guess. Again, didn't really have a ton of knowledge about dialing, didn't even have a dial on our scope. A lot of the long range stuff was new to us. So he shoots at 300, the deer's sitting there looking at us, doesn't even move. And I'm like, what the heck? So I shoot, and then he shoots again, and we don't even see a bullet impact. And my dad gets his rangefinder out, and he's like, it's 950 yards. We're like, oh my gosh. So we run all the way over there, we get up to 500 yards, and by this time he's moved further up the hill, and he's closer to a bunch of does now. So we get up to about 500 yards, and I sit down on the sticks. I rack a round in. I settle my sights on the buck right behind the shoulder. And I slowly press the trigger. Click. Nothing. We pull the round out. The primer's hit. There's nothing going on. Load another round. Click. Pull it out. Load another round. Click. We go through a whole box of ammo. Turns out, we find out later that it was so cold that the firing pin had frozen. Finally, we get a round to go off. He drops. Again, we had educated guess on how high to hold. I knew I had to hold, I think it was around 20 inches high. So I'm aiming at the top of his ear to hit the middle of his body. And we hit him, and he just drops. And I load another round in, ready to go, and all of a sudden he gets back up and he's running, and he's hurting bad. And we're trying to get another round in and in him, and the firing pin keeps freezing up. So I run all the way back to the truck, almost a half mile, grab a box of ammo, and I come back, and we go over there, and we're looking for blood, and we can't find anything. I knew it was a good shot. We saw him drop. He dropped as soon as I hit him. And we get back to the trailer that night, and we're just devastated, my dad and I. And Jake, he can't think about anything, but we got cookies, we got all sorts of snacks, we're gonna have hot dogs for dinner. He's completely unbothered. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we can't find the buck of my life. like the biggest buck I've ever seen. We couldn't find a drop of blood. So we go back the next morning and we scour all over. All three of us are looking. We finally find one spot of blood. And luckily my dad has been to Africa a few times and he's learned a lot about tracking from the guides over there. They're incredible. Could never do anything that they do, but luckily he learned from them. And we tracked this deer up and over the mountain and then around the mountain for about 3 miles and all day, drop by drop, just pinpoints of blood every 50 or so yards at the very closest. And at one point we even saw mountain lion tracks over his tracks. So we tracked him all day long, and there were multiple times where we almost gave up and we'd go back and we'd find one more little tiny pinprick of blood. And we finally found him later that afternoon under a tree and were able to finish him off. So that was a really fun hunt. We packed him out back to camp a couple miles. It was fun to shoot these 2 deer back to back. It was a really awesome 2 years, and really what got me insanely addicted to mule deer, because they're both really big bucks. This one, again, both around the 180 mark. Score's not super important, but this buck is right at that 30-inch wide mark. Just looks like he's got baseball bats coming out of his head. So super cool buck. Another animal I've got really got me into antelope hunting was this buck that I shot in Wyoming. I believe was 2023. This was a super fun hunt. My dad and I both had tags. We had scouted out this area in a super small little town, found a bunch of bucks. We never hunted antelope before, so we didn't really know what we were looking for. We tried and watched a bunch of videos on like where you do the guessing of the scores and tried to learn as much as we could. But my dad and I both shot bucks opening morning. We had shot his buck, and as we're cleaning his buck, I see my buck running across the valley. And I saw him and I said, he's really good, I'm gonna go after him. So my dad's sitting there cleaning his buck with me in the scope, just watching me go over. And I go over, I'm crawling on my hands and knees, and I'll put the video in here, but I get up to him and I'm crawling and I look up and I don't see him. And I keep crawling and then I get up and all of a sudden he's right to my left, he's just to my left, about 50 yards. And I just pull my rifle up and shot him right there. And it was so fun because we had my buck down right there and my dad's buck was a couple 100 yards away. Cleaned both of them out. I think they're a beautiful animal. Just a super fun animal to hunt. Right here, I've got my turkey fan. I had not really had a ton of interest in turkey hunting until the last couple of years. I drew this limited entry tag in Utah. It was almost like a little miniature elk hunt. I called to this Tom back and forth for a couple days. I was able to finally put some TSS into him at 65 yards. Got a little bit over a 10¼ inch beard. Just beautiful animals. They taste great. I would highly recommend a turkey hunt to anybody and everybody. Super fun way to get out in the spring. This next buck is my 2025 Utah mule deer buck. This hunt challenged me in a lot of ways that I hadn't really ever been challenged before on a hunt. We'd spotted this buck, my wife actually spotted him the night before an opener, all the way on top of the mountain in the middle of nowhere where it'd be almost impossible to get to. But we came back opening morning and didn't see him at all. So my family went home after opening weekend and I stayed because I wanted to hunt this buck. Not the biggest buck, but I was really excited about him. I thought he was a cool old deer. And so I sat on the glassing knob and I glassed him for 12 hours a day for 2 days straight. And I talked to my cousin Chandler because he'd kind of pop up and over. He'd come over to the north side and feed for a few minutes and he'd go back over to the south side to bed in the trees where his bed was. I finally talked to Chandler and I said, you know what? I said, I need to go up there. It was super steep. The day before I tried to go up there and I busted him out of his bed because it was so steep and slick and you just really can't see anything until you're up on top of it. So I busted him out. But I asked Chandler, I said, hey, do you think I should just go up there and try and get him? He said, if you've been watching him go up there back and forth for 2 days, you gotta go kill him. He's not gonna move. So it was about 3 o'clock. I decided to start hiking up the mountain. And about halfway up, I realized I'd made a mistake. I'd gone up the super steep side. It's all super steep, but it was really steep, like cliffed out. And I was crawling on my hands and knees, slipping in the snow. And there were a few points I thought I was gonna fall and die. But I made it to the top and I knew his bed was somewhere in the area up there. So I was laying there with my rifle, just checking up every couple of minutes to see if he was gonna pop back over that north side and start feeding again. So I laid there for about an hour And eventually I peeked back up, I laid back up with my rifle, and he was standing there about 120 yards away just feeding. Had no idea it was there. So sat up, put the crosshairs on him, one shot with the 156 Berger, took him out, and I was super excited to kill that deer. It was solo in a really hard to get to place. That was really the first time that I had a buck that from the beginning of the hunt I knew I wanted to try and kill. A lot of the other animals I found, I've gotten lucky, stumbled upon them, but this was one that, even though he's not the biggest buck I have, he was one that I set my eyes on, and I set a goal to kill that specific buck, and I did. So that was a really cool experience, and I learned a lot. So this right here is my 2024 limited entry black bear from Utah. This was a bait hunt. I felt super intimidated going into this hunt. Never even hunted bears before, but I learned a lot about baiting and went down to the local donut factory and bought all their leftovers for their day old stuff. Filled 2 truck beds full of donuts and breads and sweets. And my dad and I went up the week before the hunt. We set up 2 tree stands and these 2 different baits. Opening weekend, we get up there, we start hunting, and this bear had shown herself a few times, this sow. Had never really seen me. One day, I get into the tree stand, and she's already there at the bait because I'm walking up, and she runs off, so I hurry and go get my tree stand, and I think, okay, I want to kill that bear. She's a nice bear, super pretty coat, like just a beautiful coat. So I've got my bow out, and I'm just waiting for about 2 hours, and all of a sudden I hear her coming down the trail behind me. She gets to my tree, and instead of walking past me to go to the bait, she stands up on her hind legs and looks up at me, and I just knew she was coming up. So luckily I had my Glock on my chest, and in about 2 seconds she's 25 feet up the tree. Her face is about right here next to mine with her mouth open. I don't think she was mad, she's just hungry, and I smelled like donuts because I've been packing in donuts. Nonetheless, she was too close. I was gonna kill her anyways, and I pulled my handgun out and put it on her chest right there at point blank and shot her out of the tree. I was a little disappointed at first because I wanted to shoot her with my bow, but it was a pretty epic hunt. My wife was kind of mad because I got down and called her in the little spot I did have service. Didn't really tell her much, I just said, hey, I almost got killed by a bear, but I got it. And started trying to get this bear off the mountain before dark, and other bears started to show up. A super cool experience. Don't really want to get that close to a bear ever again, but I do want to hunt more bears. So that's a quick walkthrough of some of the animals I have in my house and some of my favorite hunting stories that get me excited to go back out this fall. I'm curious to hear for some of the tags that you're putting in for and hoping to draw this year. I'm also curious to hear about some of your stories maybe that make you excited to go back into the mountains and keep hunting. Best of luck to all of you in the draw this year, and best of luck to all of you in the field when you draw that tag.